Hello, so my topic for my presentation is surrogacy, the examples of Sarah, Rachel, and Leah, and the challenges with infertility today. This research paper aims to examine the concept of surrogacy from biblical examples of Sarah, of course with Hagar, Rachel and Bilhah, and Leah and Zilpah, and then cross-examine the contemporary context of surrogacy while preferring godly example, godly counsel for women dealing with infertility issues and considering the option of surrogacy. In this paper, we looked at from biblical examples. In Genesis 16, we see the story of Sarah and her handmaid Hagar. So we know the story how Sarah was getting older and she didn't have any children, and she at some point became anxious about it and encouraged, or rather told her husband Abraham. At the time, their names were Sarai and Abraham. Their names hadn't been changed yet by God at the time, and she told Abraham to go into her handmaid Hagar, and Hagar, Abraham obeyed her, literally went in, and Hagar conceived. And we see that after Hagar conceived, she became so rude and disobedient, and she looked down on her mistress essentially, and it upset Sarah to the point where she had to tell Abraham that this handmaiden had to go. At some point, she was blaming Abraham for the situation she was in, forgetting that she actually encouraged him. She brought it up. She's the one that instigated the whole thing. But that whole situation did not end well, because Abraham told her, it's your maid, she's your maid, deal with her as you want. And we see that at the end of the day, she ended up maltreating Hagar to the point where she had to run away. And the child that was supposed to bring joy to the family ended up being something that caused pain for Hagar herself, because she was more of like a pawn in the scheme of Sarah and Abraham. And that was the first situation where we see that, and it was a normal custom in Asian Northeast, that women who couldn't have children would give their handmaidens to their husbands to have children, to continue their lineage on their behalf. And so that what Sarah did was not unusual in the customs of that day, but it was in disobedience to God, or in lack of patience, not waiting on God to fulfill his promise that he had already given them, that he would make Abraham a father of many nations. So it seemed to me like Sarah was trying to fast track the process, and in the end, that whole situation didn't turn out well. And it seemed like the same kind of situation 2 generations down, when Jacob felt shortchanged by Laban, and he got Leah, the older sister, instead of Rachel, the younger, more beautiful sister that he wanted. And we see the account of that in Genesis 29 and 30, and how because Leah was unloved, the Bible said that God opened her womb, blessed her with children, and Rachel, the more favorite wife, who Jacob served longer for, was left out of the picture of having children at the time. And she also gave her handmaid Bilhah to Jacob, who went into her and had children. And we see that there was a lot of competition and struggles between the sisters, which in the long run fulfilled the plan of God to create the lineage of Israel from these women. But the situations could have been different if this issue of competition had not been there. Surrogacy that we find in contemporary times in the discourse of infertility will lean more towards IVF, which is in vitro fertilization, and ART, which is assisted reproductive technology, and generally is used in the conception process in surrogacy. Some of the key terms that we'll be talking about in this paper includes surrogacy, which is defined as an arrangement often backed up with a legal document in which the surrogate mother carries a child in her womb on behalf of the intending parents. And in this paper, we'll refer to the intending parents a lot as the IPs. Then the infertility, we define infertility as the inability of a man or a woman to reproduce, which is not natural. It's not the natural healthy state of an adult organism. And then one word that we're going to be referring very often to in this paper is the term altruistic. And it's simply the behavior of caring about the needs and happiness of other people, even if there is no gain or advantage to yourself, being willing or doing things to help other people. It's an unselfish, philanthropic behavior without expecting anything in return. There was a lot of information that was gotten from journals and articles that had been written by different people on the topic of surrogacy and infertility. And there are a lot of myths that have been debunked by the research itself. Some of those myths include the fact that, when you hear about surrogacy, the popular story about baby M comes to mind, where after the surrogacy arrangement had been concluded, the mother found it so difficult to relinquish the daughter or the child. And that picture often comes to mind when we hear people talking about surrogacy. But contrary to a lot of those public perception, surrogacy doesn't necessarily have to end with pain of separation on the part of the mother and the child. In fact, the data has shown that many of the surrogates gladly relinquish these children to their intending parents because they were never theirs to keep in the first place, especially in recent time, contemporary times, where surrogacy is gestational, meaning that the child that's being carried it has no biological ties to the surrogate mother. They are actually, in most times, the egg and the sperm of the intending parents or donor people that have been fertilized in the labs and through IVF and ART have been transferred into the wombs of the surrogates. So they have no genetical ties. So contrary to those myths that there's so much pain and bitterness when the separation comes and the mothers do not want to give up the children, research has actually proven that to be wrong. And we also look at some of course, the data on women that have gone into surrogacy because of the monetary gain that they get from it. In fact, there is a lot of data to show that in third world countries such as India, a lot of poor women were being exploited for surrogacy. Like, they were going into it because of the financial gain that they were getting from it, and it was really frowned upon because children are a blessing, they are a gift, and shouldn't be used as businesses. So that data has been shown to exist, from research. And then when you look at the issue of competition or collaboration, raising children can be communal affair. There is a popular saying in Nigerian culture that it takes, a community to raise a child. And the Bible also advocates for communal living, relationships, building families. And so as much as people desire to have children, it can be a collaborative effort between people helping each other out. And this paper looks at a lot of research from the book My Body, Their Baby by Grace Cowell. And in that book, she talks about how she carried the baby of her friends for them because they had suffered from years of childlessness and infertility. And she had thought about it for a long while and eventually went through the process with her friends, with her family. And she also shares her story in this book and a lot of research that can be in information that she put forth that has been gotten through research and study that she did. And there are key issues that need to be addressed when you're considering surrogacy as an option. There is, of course, the popular perception about surrogacy. People want to have, families want to have children by themselves. So the first option, of course, is going to be trying to consider how you can have those children yourself. But there are cases where that's not an option. And yes, even though adoption is a superior alternative where adopt children of people that cannot take care of the children or children in orphanage homes and all that, that's good, that's noble. But there is also the fact that some people desire to have genetic ties to their own children, and that necessarily need not be frowned upon or looked on as something negative. So it's an option that they could consider. And so The paper addresses a lot of this popular perception, some myths that are not necessarily true, and stereotypes against women that are considering surrogacy and women that are carrying their, are surrogates for other people. There are issues that need to be addressed in terms of the moral and religious perspective. So what does your church body or what does the Bible say about this issue of surrogacy? And we'll find out that the Bible does not consider surrogacy as a sin, so it's an option. But in considering surrogacy, a lot of discussion between the surrogates and the intended parents has to be done, a lot of thought, because there are some salient issues like, would you be willing to consider terminating or putting the surrogate at the risk of death? Because if the pregnancy becomes problematic, those issues need to be addressed. What are the lines that you would draw or not draw? And then even in selection of the embryo, will it be right for you to select superior healthy embryos by embryonic testing just because you do not want to transplant an embryo that may be considered defective? That is, the child may be prone to one genetic condition or may not be healthy or the other. Are those issues that are ethical? You need to talk about those things and have those discussions. And then the consideration for the children that will be born from surrogacy, and even the children of the surrogates. So most of the surrogates already have their own families, their own children, and carrying the child of another person can be emotionally challenging on the family. All these issues need to be discussed and how they'll be tackled as you progress on the surrogacy journey. There have to be a consideration of the laws that govern the location where you are. And if you need to travel to be able to have surrogacy done peradventure in your own region, surrogacy is not legalized. You need to have those conversations and know what the laws at the jurisdiction say about surrogacy. One of the research that was put forth in the study showed that in the state of Louisiana, for instance, some form of compensation beyond just reimbursement for the medical cost would be considered as an offense, punishable by law. You could be fined in the tune of up to $50,000 for those going against those child laws. There are some interesting data that have been found from study of surrogacy and infertility. 97% of participants in third world country like India clearly stated that they went into it because they had financial motivation. But on the flip side, another study shows that 99% of the beneficiaries of childlessness, it's an acronym, COTS, childlessness overcome through surrogacy, have experienced outstanding success. So that's a good thing. And then another study shows that 100% of participants that were studied told their children, because a very huge concern for a surrogacy arrangement is the children that would be born from surrogacy. Like, would they leave and be sad because they know that they were conceived by their mother, surrogate mother, just to be given away? That challenge is there. And but it found 100% of the intending parents actually told their children when they were of age about their surrogacy, and that the children were positive about it, that they were surrogate born and they were positive about it, especially in cases of gestational surrogacy. And then on the part of the children of the surrogates themselves, which is another huge consideration, how they would feel, the surrogates actually told them, 100% of them in that study told them about the pregnancy before, the pregnancy itself. So that's good data on surrogacy. Now, what are the implications for ministering to women? We have to be careful that in advocating options like surrogacy and IVF and all this artificial reproductive technology, addressing the challenges of infertility, we need to be careful because there are progressive Christian movements that advocate for surrogacy, but in advocating for surrogacy, advocates for a lot of other issues that may not be in line with scriptures. For instance, LGBTQIA and all those. Some of these progressive movements also lean towards advocating those forms. And it is imperative as Christian counselors that in advocating for whatever cause, we need to be sure that there is a biblical basis and we are not going out of orthodoxy in advocating for some of these issues. So of course, there are opponents, people that are against surrogacy, even Christians who are against surrogacy, because some of them feel that the whole situation of surrogacy is akin to having a relationship of sex out of marriage because the seed of another person is implanted into another person's wife. They can go to extremes to call it adultery and all that. In addressing those issues, some of the research has also shown that people accept organs from donors, accept blood from donors, and it's not frowned upon. So being able to carry the child of another person on their behalf is akin to being even a donor of an organ, and it shouldn't necessarily be frowned upon by opponents of surrogacy. There are actually benefits that surrogacy, many research has shown that many of the surrogate mothers, they actually found joy in being able to gift somebody the gift of this child. That was for them the motivation. The highest motivation for them was being the joy in relinquishing these children to their parents, and the fact that you realize that you are helping somebody end their journey of childlessness. It's a benefit that cannot be quantified. First of all, there should be evaluation and finding out, deep introspection on the part of the intending parents if they actually have a call to parenthood, because some people may be in love with the idea of being parents, but they may not necessarily be called to parenthood. And from the Bible, we know that, even celibacy isn't a sin. Choosing not to marry is not a problem. You can live a purposeful life without being married or without having children. So you need to be sure that you have that call first. There has to be conscientious use of, IVF, making sure that you have explored the options and you're sure that IVF or surrogacy, there's no other alternative for your particular situation before considering that. And then you also have to be very concerned about the surrogate that's willing to help, knowing that they're making a sacrifice, and also being willing to provide, the best of healthcare and everything that is necessary to make sure that the surrogate is safe, catered for, and all that. So there has to be careful, thoughtful, covenantal agreements, frank talk, discussing the key issues, making sure that you're considering all the ethical options before going into surrogacy. And then also consider the monetary considerations, whether the environment, the location allows for any kind of monetary compensation in cases of surrogacy. In conclusion, I want to say that surrogacy need not be fraught with stigma. It's a viable option for addressing infertility. There has to be prayerful, thoughtful, ethical consideration of all the medical options before embarking on a surrogacy journey. And while altruistic surrogacy is great, it's also acceptable for the surrogate to receive a gift from the intending parents. Thank you.